Whilst researching for my thesis, I came across a random journal article Morton wrote about queer ecologies and the interconnectedness with all things being human and or non-human. A philosopher, educator, and author, Timothy Morton speaks on and emphasizes the movement object-oriented ontology by modes of questioning epistemological and ontological problems. Morton argues that through something called subsendence, we might be able to emphasize and find pleasure, playfulness, and solidarity with all things and non-human things, rather than enforce our anthropocentrism and control over them, as well as the necessity to rethink politics and default ontological ideas in order to reach a symbiosis of solidarity, of both being and doing. Timothy Morton is Rita Shea Guffey Chair in English at Rice University. She has collaborated with Bjork, Laurie Anderson, Jennifer Walsh, Ralph Nilder, Arnaud Deter, Sabrina Scott, Adam McKee, Jeff Bridges, Justin Gariglia, Oliver Eliason, and Pharrell Williams. She co-wrote and appears in Living in the Future's Past, a 2018 film about global warming with Jeff Bridges. She is the author of the libretto for the opera Time, Time, Time by Jennifer Walsh. She's the author of Being Ecological, Humankind, Solidarity with Non-Human People, Dark Ecology for a Logic of Future Coexistence, Nothing, Three Inquiries in Buddhism, Hyperobjects, Philosophy and Ecology After the End of the World, Realist Magic, Objects, Ontology, Causality, The Ecological Thought, Ecology Without Nature, 8 other books and 200 essays on philosophy, ecology, literature, music, art, architecture, design, and food. Her work has been translated into 10 languages, and in 2014, Morton gave the Wellick Lectures in Theory. So yeah, thank you so much for being here, and take it away, or what have you.
Gosh, thank you so much for that very, very nice introduction, Julian, and thank you for having me, Klara, and everybody. It's a great honor to be here. And actually, the thing that I'm going to talk to you today is called the Antidote. And I'm calling it the Antidote because I'm sure that, like you, I've been suffering quite a lot these last few weeks and months from the fascism. Let's just call it what it is. In the USA in particular, but also just globally. It's a reaction, obviously, to the kind of extreme neoliberalism, which has created this incredibly tattered economic sort of structure. But also, of course, for the same reason, it's a reaction to the tattered biosphere, which is a result of this extreme neoliberalism. If Marx had access to the word emergent and to the phrase adaptive AI, he could have probably described what was going on, in volume 1 of Capital, little fortune cookie size thing. It's an adaptive AI that machine learns how to extract life from the biosphere without stopping. And the question that we face right now is, do we want that to carry on happening? Because if it carries on happening a lot more, it'll do what it does and just suck it all out. We've got about a decade to stop the worst part. And so, we're really faced with a pretty strong choice here between the past and the future. And that's not just a political choice between, what we've already got and some kind of post-capitalist future. That's actually a choice literally between past as a kind of ontological category, actually, and an artistic category, furthermore, and futurality, I would prefer to say, which is the possibility that things can be different. If you think about it another way, just very simply, it's a choice between repeating things on automatic and being creative. The metric of especially neoliberalism, but capitalism in general, is efficiency, okay? It's doing the same thing more and more efficiently. The metric, however, for a post-capitalist world is creativity. And that means that the phenomenology of that world, right, like how it's going to feel to us who've been like soaked in this system for decades and centuries and whatever, this system, which is basically automated slavery, right? It's going to feel sort of broken and slightly hesitant and involving failed starts and false starts and all kinds of insights as well, right? But it's not going to feel very efficient. It's going to feel strange and weird. But I think that's a good thing that we can learn, that once we kind of have that feeling that, oh dear, it's all a little bit broken and hesitant, that might actually be a good sign, you know. Because then we'd be living oriented to the future. Now, the thing about capitalism is it is actually oriented to the past, just very strictly, right? Like a price is a reflection of the past state of a commodity, okay? So however close the stock trading comes to the present, so-called present moment, and they've got it within nanoseconds right now, it's never going to be actually in the moment. And so by definition, the closer it comes to the present moment, the more violent it's going to get, right? It just gets more and more violent as it comes closer. And, you know, there's a great competition now in New Jersey where to put the servers, right? If you put your server like a few millimeters closer to Wall Street, it's going to do those trades a little bit faster. We've got Bitcoin. Of course, the mining of Bitcoin is now like sucking a lot of, producing a lot of carbon emissions, you know, to create those $60,000 per Bitcoin things now. So we've got a scary, challenging situation happening right now. And one of the reactions to it is fascism, which is really just like, in social terms, the same as what is in psychoanalysis called the schizophrenic defense, okay? And I'm talking here as the brother of somebody who has schizophrenia, right? Now, it's actually a reaction to extreme anxiety, okay? It's a reaction to sort of the bottom falling out of your world. Just in the same way, the fascism was a reaction, the Nazi fascism was a reaction to the Weimar Republic, you know, with the economy just complete collapse. This reaction takes the form of very similar to a virus, actually. Viruses are little bits of code, if you like, that have been shed from a single-celled organism, and then, you know, your body becomes a sort of factory for creating more and more of that virus until you die. Yeah. Fascism is basically that, right? It's like finding like some kind of meaning that isn't really there in little bits of cultural code, like swastikas, that don't really have any intrinsic meaning. And so it's also very past oriented, right? It's a kind of extreme form of like maintaining the capitalist order by sort of trying to find meaning in the past. But meaning is not in the past. Meaning is in the future, or rather it's better to say meaning is the future. Yeah, form is the past, appearance is the past. Everywhere you look, it's the past, right? It's kind of hard to know sometimes if there even is going to be a future. And there is such a thing as cynical reason that kind of trains us to think, well, why can't we see anything creative and novel in our world? Therefore, there isn't any. And therefore, my job as a so-called smart person is to try to prove to you that, you know, there's much less hope than you think. Okay, and that's kind of what we do learn in theory class, right? And it's sort of true, but in a funny way, it can be deployed as a kind of lie in the form of the truth, like a very disempowering thing. And so I like to sort of say, well, yes, the kind of Althusser kind of idea that ideology is everywhere is correct, right? It's correct. Everything is ideology, right? Take a look around you. Do you like everything that you see? No, therefore, right, it's the past sucked, and so we're kind of caught in something. But just because ideology is everywhere, it doesn't mean that ideology is everything, okay? The future, by definition, is invisible, yeah? And the future isn't a dot on a line, nor is the past a dot on a line. The future and the past are actually kind of overlapping, right? They overlap everywhere in the universe. Take, for example, the sentence that I'm just saying. You know, if I was teaching this to my undergrads, I'd be like, you never know what the end of this sentence is going to be. Elephant, banana, close parenthesis, period, question mark, dot, dot, dot. Yeah. So the meaning never fully arrives, but it's there, right? It's not different from, it's in those words, right? but it's never quite there. The words are the past, the meaning is the future. Or take, for example, a banana. I don't know why I love to talk about bananas these days, but you know, everywhere you look for the banana, you don't find the banana. What you find is banana data, and data is just the past tense of the Latin verb to give. It's stuff that's been given, and it's not, that doesn't just mean scientific data, right? That just means any kind of data. Like the smell of the banana, you have a banana smell. You lick the banana, you have a banana lick. You look at the banana, you have a banana sight. You write a poem about a banana, you have a banana poem. You use a banana as an example in a lecture that you're doing about object withdrawal, and you have a banana example. The banana learns to speak and goes on Oprah and is like, I was just subjected to tremendous bananaism by other bananas. And that's banana interview. That's not the banana either. Then the banana goes to psychoanalysis because by now it's really upset and traumatized. And it's like, well, you know, I came to consciousness in the conversation. This non-binary philosopher person was talking, and I feel now totally triggered every time they say anything. That's banana psychotherapy talk. Okay, so even the banana can't access the banana, but it's a banana, right? It's not an avocado, it's a banana. So we have this world which is exactly what it is, but never as it appears, in which the banana, as it were, is the future. Yeah. And the banana data is the past, and they kind of overlap. They're different, but they overlap, right? And that's the fundamental definition of irony, and that's the first ingredient of the antidote. There's three ingredients to the antidote, okay? Irony, ambiguity, and beauty are the antidote phenomenologically and politically to fascism. The more you can inculcate in your world irony, ambiguity, and beauty, and these are not just subjective states, right? They're actually political actions, I feel, and definitely part of any sort of aesthetic practice. And I'd like to sort of define them for you in a kind of ecological and ontological way today, because this is like my job right now. I'm so upset, and I actually find it, for personal reasons, very triggering, as should any normal person, I think, to see crimes being committed by grown-ups in public. And so when that coup happened, the one that the Times of India called the Ku Klux Klan, it was deeply, deeply upset. It should be, right? And so it's sort of like I'm now on this mission where I just talk very upfront about what I'm actually thinking. I spent like 6 to 10 years trying to give people the socialism feeling without using the word, because people can get so kind of like, they have so many concepts about it, right? But like the idea that you're involved in a number of different overlapping groups and that you can do action on a planet scale that doesn't contradict action like on a individual or small group or neighborhood or whatever scale, and that these scales are overlapping and different, that's, to me, that's the socialism feeling, and a kind of feeling of orientation towards the future rather than orientation towards the past. But now I'm just being upfront about it. The other thing to be upfront about right now is that any truly ecological socialist project must include foundationally ending patriarchy and white supremacy. That's like, those are not things that are like, oh, let's create it and then let's do it. It's actually, we have to do that. Not necessarily first on some timeline, but that's foundational. Yeah, because that's what solidarity with non-human beings actually requires. Okay, so, you know, I'm just saying these things up front now rather than sort of obliquely, and it's a great honor to be able to share them with you. So anyway, irony is the first thing, right? Irony means that something is the same this way round and it's different that way round, right? There's a kind of contradiction, right? Irony is the feel of contradiction. You know, things, everything has a feel, right? Like chips have mouth feel, according to PR. You know, the word mouthfeel has really bad mouthfeel, by the way, so it's terrible. But contradiction has a feel to it, and that feel is called irony. When things are contradicting yet true, right? Like a sentence, like this sentence is false, is true, but it's false, right? It's true, but it's false. That feel is called irony, right? Now, what's it made out of? It's made out of reality. Reality is signaled to us by irony. Irony isn't some kind of a weird escape velocity, look how cute I am sort of gesture. It's actually a signal of reality, okay? Because reality is ironic, because everywhere it's exactly what it is, but never exactly how it appears, okay? So this overlap involves ambiguity, right? You've got your appearance and you've got your essence of things, and they're the same, but they're different. And this is step two, right? This is the next ingredient in the antidote. And first ingredient is irony. Next ingredient is ambiguity. What is ambiguity? Ambiguity is accuracy feel, right? Like chips have the mouth feel, reality has irony feel. And accuracy is ambiguity. Ambiguity is accuracy feel, okay? What does it mean? Well, you know, I had LASIK a few years ago, so I still do need to go to the optometrist. And when you're at the optometrist, they put the little device on you, right? And they're like, is it number one or number two? Number one or number two? And they just sort of get more and more and more precise kind of like correction to your eyes, right? And you always, don't you, get down to a point at which it's like, is it number one or is it number two? And you're like, actually, I don't know anymore. Number one is slightly crappy this way. Number two is slightly crappy this way. And I can't decide because my time is finite and I'm finite and lens grinding is finite and optometry is finite and the doctor is finite. Yeah. And so now I have, you know, I can't do this forever, right? For various reasons. This is as good as it gets. What does it mean? It means whatever choice I make, I have an accurate prescription. Okay. So ambiguity is a signal of accuracy, right? Once you find that you have a choice between two equally possible explanations or interpretations or moves that you're going to make in social space or art or whatever, you're onto something. Yeah. Fascism is eliminating irony and ambiguity all over the place, right? Ambiguity, this definition of ambiguity gives you a fake news detector. Ambiguity is not about vagueness. Ambiguity is about at least two possible interpretations of something being possibly true, right? Science is ambiguous, yeah, because truth in science means interpretations of patterns in data. It doesn't mean looking under the hood of the data at the so-called real. Okay, so truth is statistical, right? Since 1760-ish, truth has been statistical in white Western philosophy, and it's like, I don't know, recently, like 97% of scientists think global warming is caused by humans. That was many years ago, actually. Now I hope that's more, but like, that's better than saying it is caused by humans, damn it, and if you don't agree, I'm going to torture you until you do because I'm the Spanish Inquisition. That's not true. That's just authoritative, right? So science true implies ambiguity, right? So part of the truth feel of science is ambiguity, right? Like, and so actually ambiguity and irony in art is a little bit like part of also the ingredients of how to feel like a scientist. And I think like part of my job also, as well as giving people the socialism feeling, is to try to give people the science feeling. Everyone else in my family was like, why don't you do chemistry at Cambridge? Why are you going to do English lit at Oxford? I'm like, I don't know. I just saw this video of Someone by Bells with John Betjeman and it was really cool looking and I really wanted to go. It's just a rubbish reason to do anything, right? We just saw this video, it was really beautiful. And you know, for some reason I can interpret poems. I can see them really fast. I don't even know why, you know. But you know what I'm doing actually, I'm still on the mission of science because I'm trying to give people the feeling of being a scientist without needing the privilege or the intelligence or the ability to differentiate with respect to X or the money that's required to get a science PhD. Okay. Science feel, right? Like if more people felt like sciencey, it would be better, right? We'd be more orientated towards things that we don't quite understand but are true, things that we can't quite see but they're real. It's called coronavirus. You know, like thank you, coronavirus, for doing the thing that Greta Thunberg shouldn't be doing because it puts her in terrible danger to be doing, which is telling the whole world that they've got it very wrong about global warming. Because what coronavirus has done is orientate us towards the future and orientate us towards science, actually. And the profound ambiguity of it, right? And also the fact that it's like completely destroyed the idea that neoliberalism is anything like workable at all. You know, this is like the good news aspect of it, right? On an individual basis, I could die really easily if I got it. But on another scale, it's like, oh, thank you so much for coming. Plus, also, it's real. Like, it's a real actual virus, whereas the previous president, whose name I don't like to say, is a kind of a virus. Like, they are but they're also a coronavirus in a way, because they're trying to like retweet George the Thirdness in America, right? Like George the Thirdness is like the basic viral problem with America, because George the Third and America are both based on slavery. So they've got this thing in common, right? And so there's always this possibility that someone like George the Third, and he even looks like George the Third. If you look at Gilray cartoons of George the Third, he's got the lips, he's got the stupid little squinty eyes. It's the same thing, you know. Anyway, so ambiguity, right? Irony, ambiguity. Irony is a reality signal. Ambiguity is an accuracy signal. And now we come to the third ingredient of the antidote, which is beauty. Okay, so what is that? I'm going to define it transcendentally, not in terms of like, this is a beautiful thing and that's a beautiful thing, because that's just reification, and it's usually very oppressive when people do it, right? Like the philosopher Edmund Burke, and he's like, beautiful things are small and cute because you can manipulate them, and sublime things are really big and scary because they're manipulating you. And it's just like, that's totally, you know, reactionary way of thinking about it, right? So I'm going to go along with the Kantian definition, actually, which is a lot more left than you think. I think Marx got gaslit by Hegel. I think we all got gaslit by Hegel, actually. And I personally believe that you can take the Hegel out of the Marx and actually like put a little bit of other things in and go back a little bit to the Kant, which is the OOO gesture, actually. And if you put it back in, it's much, much better. It's just you have to tolerate some things which are quite nice to tolerate. You have to tolerate the idea of hedgehogs like with little Che Guevara caps on, and you have to tolerate the idea of sounding a bit like Yoda, because in the end, the Kantian beauty depends upon something like the Force. He was fascinated with mesmerism, right, with animal magnetism, which is basically the Force. You know, the most of white Western philosophy the last 200 years has been a conversation with the Force. You know, thank you, Star Wars, for making it explicit. I like to talk about corny things sometimes. And I'm writing a book called Spacecraft, which is basically mostly about the Millennium Falcon. And another version of this talk, it could be about hyperspace, because in a way, the American word for socialism is hyperspace. You know, if somebody like Bernie Sanders would just say like, okay, we're going to go to hyperspace now, everybody would be much, much happier with it. And it would actually mean the same thing. But if you've got like another 2 hours, I can prove it to you and be really funny. And it'll have, and there'll be like Muppets in it and everything. But anyway, what am I saying with this mesmerism thing? What I'm saying is that there is a kind of mind meld between what is falsely called the subject and what is falsely called the object in this thing called beauty, which is not an entity. It's like a vibe or an experience or something like that. But those are the wrong words, because they already imply a soul inside a body or a mind inside a body, and that's false, right? So it's more like a mode in which things happen can be beautiful, and this mode can happen actually in trees and iPhones and pencils, and you know. But as I said to the interviewer Kirsty Wog, you know, in an interview that will never be broadcast because they replaced me with Rees Mogg. Plus, also I sounded crazy. You don't have to go along with everything that Crazy Tim thinks. You can just go along with the down to like the hedgehog bit, and he's going to be fine with it, you know. So don't worry about the trees bit or the oh my God, can iPhones experience beauty and all that stuff. You don't need that, right, for some kind of progressive politics. But anyway, essentially, it is a kind of coexisting with something that might as well be a person, might as well be conscious, might as well be sentient, might as well be alive, actually, might as well have the same status as you. So it's not true to think of it as a subject-object duality. Part of ending patriarchy and white supremacy is destroying the subject-object duality, because this duality is always a master-slave duality, right? And this is my friend Denise Ferreira da Silva's project, that towards a global idea of race. You know, like any subject, object, anything, as soon as you've got that, you've basically talking master-slave duality there, and it's not right, yeah? And so the trouble for me is I use this word object, and it's corrupted from this tradition. And so when you hear the word object, you rightly project like, oh my God, that's the worst possible thing that could happen to a person. And it's true. We should have actually called it de-objectification oriented ontology, and then it would have been much easier to understand it. But we ran out of ink, and those OOO look thing, they do look quite cool, don't they? But anyway, the beauty thing is coexisting with something in this kind of way where you can't figure out whose fault it is, right? Who started it? You know, how did it start? Also, there's no conceptual frame to it, right? Like you can't point to like, well, it's the smile of the Mona Lisa that's the beautiful thing. So if I make 1 million photocopies of the smile, it'll be 1 million times more beautiful. No, not true. Or, oh, it must be happening inside of me. So maybe if I get the brain chemical, you know, and find out what it is, and I can find out like the active ingredient of it, and I can turn it into a tablet and make 1 million of them. I'll call it MDMA for some reason. I don't know why I just chose those letters out of the blue. And I'll take 100 of those. That'll be 100 times more beautiful. Probably not, because it could just kind of kill you, right? So it's not in here. It's not in there. It's kind of sort of in between, right? And so fundamentally, it is a non-violent coexisting, right? Because we're not deleting each other, yeah. But we could, you know, it could disappear, and because it's not to do with me and it's not to do with the other entity, it's kind of beyond my ego, right? And so it's intrinsically fragile, right? It is a little bit like a homeopathically scaled amount of death. That's the goth sort of truth about beauty, right? It's got this kind of death component to it. It's a little bit of a warning, like you could die, they could die. It's your fragility is something that's built into things. That's sort of part of it, right? I'm trying to get people interested in beauty because for a while, art and politics and so on has been more interested, I think, in the sublime, you know, and the sublime is great if you're an oppressed person, right? Because the sublime relies on the ability to think. The sublime is think feel, okay? It's like, oh my God, I'm free. I can think what I want. Yeah. And it's the active ingredient of beauty, which is truth feel. Beauty is truth feel, as John Keats said, right? Beauty is truth feel is beauty, or whatever he said in the Ode on the Grecian Urn, right? It's true. It's the feeling of true, right? The feeling of truth. It's the, you know, the Spandau Ballet feeling of true, right? Like the It's literally that, but actually it's more like the PM Dawn version of the Spandau Ballet feeling of true. You know, the Set Adrift on Memory Bliss song. It's sort of that, because it's this feeling of I just saw my ex and they're so beautiful, and I could ask them out again, but I see they're engaged and I don't want to do violence to that. So they are not, I can't appropriate them right now, but oh my God, it's so beautiful. And it's true. This is the feeling of true, right? And it's the feeling, you know, it's the sort of, it's the science feeling, right? It's like the equation suddenly works and it's, whoa, that's true. Whether or not I like it, that's true, you know. Math is great, right? Math is better than logic because math involves the future. Logic is the past, math is the future, right? Math is the basic phenomenology is like being on the wall. You know, like you're 5 years old and you're like, what is 5 plus 3? I don't know. Or you're in your 40s and you're a serious mathematician. You're like, why is x squared plus y squared equals to z squared? Fermat's last theorem. I don't know. 400 years go by. Brave people at the wall. Oh my God, it's not a wall. It's transparent. I can see through it. Oh my, that's the math feel, right? And that's the beauty. Yeah. That suddenly the conceptual frame just kind of dissolve. Math means not computation. Yeah, that's computation. Math is becoming accustomed to, right? The Greek for math is mathesis. And the definition is the same as the definition of the Tibetan word gum, G-O-M, yeah, with an umlaut. Both of those words mean getting used to something that's already there. And it's also the Tibetan word for meditation, math and meditation, right? I'm not talking about mindfulness. I'm just talking about this slightly more basic, supposedly esoteric, but more fundamental kind of meditation where you're just getting used to something that's true, you know, and just kind of being on that wall, right? Beauty is also what beauty implies, because this relationship is fragile, right? What it implies is it always involves a slight poison kind of fringe to it. It's not completely poison. It's more like the possibility, right, of poison, right? The possibility of dead. So therefore, beauty is not just truth feel, it's also symbiosis feel, right? It's how we are as embodied beings, right? Like, so imagine you're a single-celled organism, and imagine you're kind of glopping through the ocean, right? And suddenly, and you're like, shit, did I just swallow poison? And then 20 million years later, no, they didn't, because that was actually an anaerobic bacteria, and now they're a plant. Hooray, right? Because that's a chloroplast now, or it's a mitochondria or whatever. But you can't know in advance, right? You can't know when you allow that stranger into your space, accidentally, in this case, right? That it's going to be benevolent. So it's the possibility that you might be poisoned. Like, is this relationship going to be toxic again? You know, not another one. Like, that feeling is part of the beauty, right? If you delete it, right? If you're like, okay, well, we're going to build a wall and interrogate people on the boundary so that we know who's a friend and who's an enemy, then you know you've deleted that. You've deleted the coexisting. You've deleted the symbiosis. It intrinsically involves a uneasiness, right? So the reason why I wrote this book called Humankind was because I was interested in solidarity as a feeling as well as solidarity as a choice, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff about solidarity as a choice, but actually, like, why would you even want to, right? Why would you even want to foment solidarity? Like, what's the feeling, right? In a funny way, the feeling is kind of structuring the choice, right? And so what is the feeling? And it involves this kind of uneasiness, yeah, which is also very beautiful, okay? So, and therefore it's very widely available, you know, because therefore it's kind of made out of a little bit, tiny amount, paranoia, right? Is like the basis of empathy. You don't need to delete, right? Ambiguity, yeah, is this thing gonna hurt me or not? Right? It's kind of intrinsic to the beauty feeling, right? And ambiguity is there because irony is there, because we can't check in advance what this thing is, right? What we've got is data, right? We've got this being coming over the border. It's going to happen more and more. We've got these things coming into our world. We see more things with the science now, luckily. And therefore, there's going to be a lot more irony in our world, and therefore a lot more ambiguity. And therefore, actually, if those things are things that we feel are good things that we can kind of tolerate and make things out of, then it's more beautiful. Okay, so this is how I feel. Like, I can't tell you how to do the nuts and bolts of a socialist political project, but I can tell you the ingredients of it, the phenomenological ingredients of it, right? Like, what it's going to be like when we're on the money. Okay, it's going to have these ingredients to it, yeah. And the attempt to delete ambiguity, right, is a problem, and the attempt to delete the irony is a problem, right? So, for example, fake news wants to be unambiguous, right? Like, that's how you know it's fake news now, right? With this definition of ambiguity, you have a fake news detector. You can be like, this news is going, this is true, damn it, right? It's trying to delete the fundamental ambiguity between, for example, and this is where conspiracy theory is, right? Between a squiggle and something meaningful, right? That's why QAnon is so powerful, because it's so deep down trying to just go with that very basic apophenia between, so here's a bunch of pop stars and they're all winking or doing the single eye thing, and you've put them in this nice little grid because your computer arranges them in a grid, and the grid is intrinsically meaningful because it's symmetrical and it's a grid, right? And so you put them in and it's like, hey, look, see what they're all doing, see, it's the Illuminati eye thing, and you've got your QAnon meme, right, which is exploiting this ambiguity between a squiggle, just this meaningless, oh, I just put my hand on my eye, and the meaningfulness, right, of the grid that it's in, right? It's right on there. It's right at that level, yeah. And that's why it can be so compelling, Also, it's why you can't talk to fascism. You can't persuade it. You've got to do something else, right? You've actually got to stop it, and you have to sort of stop it by blowing people's mind, unless you want to stop it with violence, which is also okay, I feel. You have to actually, you can't persuade a kind of viral meme retweeting factory, right, to do something different. You got to think of something more mind-blowing, right? And this is why fascism can't have aesthetics. Walter Benjamin, I am so sorry, not correct. Fascism is not the aestheticization of politics. It's the assumption that politics requires aestheticization. Oh, it's really boring to have these boring grey Congress buildings. We all know they were made out of slavery, but it's not enough. We need to reduce it up with more actual slavery enjoyment, and that's your white supremacy kind of upgrade version. So you storm into the Capitol using these horrible costumes from the past, right? And you're like, we're trying to juice it up, There's a fundamental difference between Black Lives Matter and Me Too actions and those actions, because those actions are based on the past and they're basically drama. They're like, here's the goody, here's the baddie, here's the dominant, here's the submissive one, here's the evil, here's the good, right? All that stuff, all the roles are determined. Whereas, I feel personally that the default art is dance, and the default dancing is called being alive, right? And the default being alive is called being asleep, right? And so actually the non-violent direct action, where you're just letting your body just exist in social space really limply like a dead weight, and then people have to move you, right? It's in the phrase Black Lives Matter. It's oriented to the future, right? It's oriented towards not having a model yet. Wouldn't it be great if they did, you see? And so it's that these things are fundamentally different, right? And it's very important right now to kind of figure that out aesthetically, and to be also like, fascism can't have the art. We've got to do more amazing, more incredible, mind-blowing, PR. Like PR is just like the dirty, nasty word for art. I'm so sorry. I feel like I get paid to say really rude things in public that aren't nice, in particular. So, but you don't have to. I'm not talking about anybody in this room. We all know good stuff, right? Like, I'm talking about these poor fools who aren't listening to this or something. Anyway, I'll shut up now before I further compromise myself, and we'll go into some Q&A. But that is my recipe for the antidote, people.